We're going to be talking about an AMD driver issue today and going off into a bigger picture of that as well beyond this specific issue. Because this ties into AMD has a very small market share of the overall GPU business. If you look at the latest Steam hardware survey, they're at about 15%. NVIDIA's closer to 76%. And I understand that Steam hardware survey isn't the entire landscape of all GPU market everywhere, but it's it's a large sample of a large number of users. And if you look at the popular video cards list, you've got to scroll quite a ways before you find AMD GPUs. And this is frustrating to me because GPUs like the RTX 3050, every month for the last year, I have done a best value GPUs to buy video, and I have just been trashing on the 3050 because GPUs like AMD's 6600 XT cost the same and absolutely destroy it in gaming performance. And even if you argue things like ray tracing performance and things like that, the differences are smaller than you might imagine because it's really a higher tier AMD GPU that's being compared to. And then honestly, at this performance tier, I don't think ray tracing makes sense to use anyway, because you should be turning down graphic settings to increase your frame rate on this type of GPU, not turning up graphic settings to increase the image quality but further reduce your frame rate, at least in my preferences. But the point is, you've got that sitting up here, and you've got to scroll a while. AMD Radeon graphics, I think this is like a integrated graphics of various types. You've got some integrated Intel popping up here. Finally, we get a discrete AMD GPU here with the RX 580. A few more NVIDIA stuff, some laptop GPUs, then we get an RX 570. Then we get some Vega 8 graphics, which are that's probably the integrated ones into some of their APUs. Now we got a 5700 XT, and now finally we're getting to cards that I'm generally recommending in my recent buying videos, like the 6700 XT, which costs the same as an RTX 3060, delivers way better gaming performance. And then similar things here with the RX 6600 and 6600 XT. 6600 costs less than a 3050 and outperforms it. The 6600 XT costs about the same as a 3050 and vastly outperforms it in most gaming workloads. And yet, if you scroll way up this list to far more popular GPUs, you'll see the 3050 and the 3060 and the 3050, which offer far worse value for the dollar in gaming performance, way up here on the list. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, and one of them is people are scared of AMD's drivers. And here's the thing, I think AMD's drivers have gotten significantly better over time. Now this is hard for reviewers when you're a sample size of one, right? I used a 6800 XT as my main GPU during the whole crypto apocalypse for GPU pricing because, frankly, I could get it for hundreds of dollars less than an RTX 3080 and got similar gaming performance other than ray tracing and did not really have any major driver issues to speak of. Also, I really liked the AMD software suite, and I thought that AMD made a lot of strides trying to catch up to NVIDIA software support, working on their upscaling with FSR1 and then FSR2, getting better and better. There's a lot of things that AMD has been doing right. They're getting their own noise suppression to compete with RTX voice. There's a lot of things. But the thing is, how do you recover from a reputation for bad drivers? And to recover from a reputation for bad drivers, I think what you need is to basically never have headlines like this. And unfortunately, we have headlines like this right now. So the problem is, even when the driver issues are rare, if they happen at all, it's another thing in the headlines or in people's their own personal use case experience, reinforcing AMD driver issues. And the thing is, when NVIDIA GPUs have driver issues, it doesn't hurt them as badly, even if they're happening more often than AMD currently, which I can't confirm. But I have heard that, well, I don't know how much I should say here, but because I don't have the... It's possible that if you look at reports of actual percentage of driver crashes brand by brand, that AMD driver crashes might actually be less frequent currently. But anyway, I don't want to get bogged down on that. But the point is that it's hard to recover from an image that you have, right? And then when headlines like this happen, it reinforces that in the general mind share and it makes people scared of it. And I've got to say, The minor driver crashes are one thing, and I think that a lot of times when your drivers are crashing, I think a lot of AMD users like to undervolt and overclock, and that can cause driver stability issues. But that is not the fault of the driver. That's the fact that you're not running it at the stock settings. And I think that's what a lot of people's driver crashes with AMD come from. Not all of them. And if you have your own driver crashes and you're running it at stock settings and everything like that, fine. I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. I'm just saying I think a lot of those issues are attributable to things like running outside of stock settings and are minor driver crashes and you recover and it's no big deal. This one that hit me and is also hitting the executive editor here at PC World and is now coming out in this headline is a big one because this caused me to have to reinstall Windows. In this article, he talks about his issue with the same driver update, and he was able, with AMD's assistance, to get a system restore point to work and solve his problem. But we're not the only people having this issue, okay? There's a lot of normal users who don't have an outlet like YouTube or PC World, to voice their issues. But a lot of people are having this issue. Now, what was this particular issue? I've already reported on it with mine, but basically with the 23.2.1 driver update recently, installed it and then Windows restarted and would not boot. Now, his issue went slightly different than mine, and he's on Windows 10 instead of me being on Windows 11, and he was installing the 23.2.2 driver, not the 23.2.1 driver, but this one came out just a couple of days after this one. So I think in many ways they're very similar drivers. Now, he goes through his whole issue, description. He uninstalls all other graphics. This is one on his test bench. He was installing a 7900 XT. And he goes through his normal process of uninstalling the NVIDIA drivers that he had on there previously, using DDU as people recommend. Everything's going fine. And then he had, let me jump down to a screenshot of it. This seems to be related to the issue. And I do the same thing too as him, but the average user doesn't necessarily need to do this. And right now, we would definitely recommend not doing this because of this particular issue. When you install the AMD software, you do have the option to click a factory reset, which is optional. You don't need to do that. Now, usually when I reinstall drivers, I want to have a clean test bench, like as similar to like a fresh install as possible. When I'm testing out my GPUs. And he says he does the same thing in this article, and so also chooses the factory reset option typically, like I do. Although that seems to be related to triggering this particular issue that's destroying the Windows installation. And to be clear, many people have installed these with the factory reset option enabled and did not have this issue. So not everyone is having this issue, but some people are having this issue, and it does seem to have the factory reset button as part of it. And AMD specifically talks about that in their statement. Now, you can read this article. I'll link it in my description. He goes through his whole issue, which was he was getting into this boot loop where you try to boot, Windows would not start. It would hit a BSOD screen that looked a lot like this one. Inaccessible boot device, and then it would try booting again, and it would do this loop repeatedly. He says he eventually was able to get to one of these screens and tried startup repair, and after doing startup repair, he would no longer, it made things worse, and he was no longer even able to get to this screen anymore. It would just have the BIOS flash screen and then immediately go into like the spinning wheel Windows thing. And then it would just be, it would be dead. He wouldn't even get to this anymore. Now, after tweeting about his issue, AMD reached out to him and then talked him through how to get back to this screen and then do a system restore point. So if you're having this issue, I guess their fix for him was he couldn't get to the screen. You'd have the BIOS the BIOS flash screen, and then he'd get to his spinning wheel. Apparently, trying to hit the power button on his PC at exactly the right time, in between the BIOS flash and the spinning wheel beginning, which was a split second, triggering that, powering off the PC at just the right time there, did get him back to this this advanced options recovery screen, and then he used the system restore point to go back to a restore point before the driver was installed, and then that solved his issue. Now, I'll mention that although I was on Windows 11, was seeing a slightly different pattern of problems. I did try a system restore point, and it seemed to work, but on my next reboot, I went into that boot issue again, and at that point, I just reset my Windows install. Anyway, now here's AMD's official statement on it, because they did give an official statement to him as solving it. Apparently, he was on call with him trying to resolve this. They called him patient zero. They were trying to figure out what was going on, because they were saying that this is rare enough that they're seeing reports of it, but it was hard for them to reproduce the issue in their labs because of its rarity. So we're not saying this is happening to everybody. But this was apparently their official report here. We have reproduced an issue that can occur in an extremely small number of instances. If a PC update occurs during the installation of AMD software, Adrenalin Edition, and we are actively investigating. So in other words, what they're saying is that this occurs in an extremely small number of instances, whatever that means. But anyway, if a PC update occurs during the installation of the AMD software. Now, he states that he made sure Windows 10 was updated prior to installing the software. And I have no reason not to believe that that was part of his normal benchmarking process. Also, I think my Windows was updated at the time. Although at this point, it's been long enough now, I can't remember actually verifying, like opening up Windows Update and making sure nothing was happening at the exact moment I installed this. So it is possible that it silently started something in the background that he was unaware of, and maybe that happened to me too, that I was unaware of, because Windows be like that sometimes. Anyway, so that's what AMD is saying, is that this is happening because a Windows update of some kind is occurring during the AMD Adrenalin Edition software installation, and that they're still actively investigating this issue. They're saying that they recommend issues ensure all system updates are applied or paused before installing the driver. Again, thought I did make sure I was updated, and so did he, but anyway. And that the factory reset option is unchecked during the driver installation process. So this is official from AMD. Don't check that box. I did have that box checked. So did the PC World editor. So we can at least confirm that that was a common thing here. We are committed to resolve issues as quickly as possible and strongly encourage users to submit issues with AMD software Adrenalin via the bug report tool. Okay, so anyway, that's the official statement from AMD. Now, from the PC World update, he says, he did the restore point, it fixed it, and then he goes on to talk about how he believes that AMD's drivers have gotten significantly better over time. I agree. I think that this is a rare issue, but this is a really, really bad issue, this particular one. And I've got to say that if I, not being a GPU reviewer and that being a test bench where all I lost when I reinstalled Windows was just some games that I had to download again, and a couple little benchmarking software things, it wasn't that big of a deal. If I was an average PC user where that was my only PC and I had to reinstall Windows or go through all of this junk to try to restore it, I wouldn't blame people if they decided not to grab an AMD GPU next time, right? Like, that is a really bad experience. So I've got to say that even if these issues are rare, it's really unfortunate the position that AMD's in right now, because to start to claw back market share, to avoid cards like the 3050 vastly outselling cards like the 6600 XT, which costs about the same and performs better, you've got to overcome the market share, the mind share problems, right? Even if a lot of the AMD driver issues are in the past, if we have any in the present, especially extreme ones like this, it's going to reinforce people's hesitation to buy AMD graphics cards. And I'll wrap up this video with thoughts on just other things, like how to recover from this. Like I said, they just need to do better. And I think they have done better, and they need to continue to do better. And what we really need is years to go by without any major AMD driver headlines. Like, it needs to just leave the consciousness of the public. People need to try out their AMD GPUs and actually not have issues, right? And not see reports of issues. That's a big part of it. And then the other part of it is that, well, in my lower budget recommendations for strictly PC gaming, I can easily recommend AMD over their NVIDIA counterparts that cost more. But when you get into other use cases, a lot of professional applications are designed more with NVIDIA hardware acceleration and support in mind. And I think AMD's actually been doing a great job of trying to come back on these issues. They've been working to get their AV1 encoding into things like OBS. It used to be that NVIDIA's streaming encoder was a lot better for live streaming because at low bit rates it was a lot better. AMD's encoder has made significant improvements, and as we start to see AV1 encoding supported on sites like Twitch, things like that, we should see these issues start to the differences get smaller over time. So AMD, I think, has been working on catching up. They just have more work to do, and we need to avoid headlines like this one in the future by just not having these problems. Now, would I still recommend AMD GPUs at the right price point? Yes. I still think I will, and I in my GPU buying guides, I think I'll still recommend them to people. I think, again, that this is a very rare issue, but this was a big one. This is a bad one. Now, to avoid this particular issue, sounds like you avoid having that factory reset button, but I'm not excusing AMD for this issue, and I think in my recommendations, I will have to continue to bring up potential reasons why you would spend more on an NVIDIA GPU, and recent issues like this one do play into that, and it is something to consider. So there is a reason why NVIDIA has larger market share, and why they get away with charging more for their GPUs. And things like this feed into that, and it's going to take a lot of time for AMD to regain the mind share over this by improving their services, improving their software support, and not getting any more headlines like this one. I hope all of you have an excellent day.